I'm supposed to talk about the electricity in China, particularly electricity industry in China. Probably we need to put it in the perspective of this, the whole bigger issue of energy and climate change. Because the electricity industry per se faces the most daunting challenges in China. As all of you know, it's about 70% of the electricity it's generated by coal-fired plants. Even though China has the largest installed capacity of wind power, and coal-fired power station remains the main part. So this is the issue. China has promised the world it will reach carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, a decade after OECD countries have reached this target. Electricity sector continues expanding up to 2030. We have to keep this in mind in comparison with other countries, particularly EU countries, where most EU countries reached a carbon peak by 1990. The electricity sector became saturated by 1990. So China's electricity industry will continue to grow and continue to expand until 2030. At the same time, it cannot continue rely on a coal-fired power plant. So what are they going to do? They're going to build a huge amount of varieties of low carbon sources of energy. That means technology has to be behind all this energy transition. That include wind, include solar, carbon capture, and nuclear. People in Europe probably say, why do you still want to expand your nuclear? Nuclear is considered as one of the low carbon energy source of energy, and China needs a whole basket of technologies to do so. The second condition for this transition is the policies have to be in place. The policies provide the guidelines, provide incentives, both positive and negative. If you think of a feed-in tariffs, that's the positive incentives, and that's the carrot. Then you think of the ETS, the carbon tax, and that's the negative incentives. So you need all the instruments available to make the target, or at least achieving the target, possible. That's where two things have to be in place: technology innovation and the policy instrument must be in place. The daunting challenges have to be appreciated outside China, simply because people need to look at it. China is a huge country. If we talk about 27 EU countries, the total population, 448 million. China doubles that, more than doubles that. It remains a developing countries. It means you still have a huge proportion of a population living at the $2, $3 a day level. The country is diverse in terms of regional development, in terms of a different group of people of development, and in terms of different industries. So all this must be taken into consideration. Now we look at the electricity industry itself. China started electricity reform quite early. In fact, in addition to UK, Australia, and Chile, I think, China started in mid-1980s. So you get the independent power producers, power purchasing agreement, all started when China just started the electricity reform. The purpose was not to change the existing system at the time, rather to introduce a new ways of expanding the industry to provide electricity to the population. So the second major reform that took place around the late 1990s, that was the corporatization of state-owned enterprises to make or force state-owned enterprises to act as a market players, to respond to market signals. That was quite early too. Corporatization, electricity used to be part of the government agency. So the Ministry of Electrical Power manages everything. That's the universal phenomenon, except only 3 or 4 countries in the world. So even in Australia, it started the corporatization in late 1980s, early 1990s. So China did not start late. The third major reform is the unbundling. It's a vertical unbundling, a horizontal unbundling. You separate the generation from transmission, distribution, and the services. What? 2003, the major reform is to introduce competition to facilitate competition. So one monopolized company was unbundled into 5 generation companies, 2 transmission companies. 2 transmission companies and manage both transmission and the distribution and the services part. 5 major generation companies, each one was allocated about 20% of the generation capacities in the country. Across regions, so you have the competition among 5 of them in a particular province, in a particular region, and in a different generation sectors, whether it's a hydro, whether it's thermal, whether it's other resources. So competition was introduced. What it did not change in 2003, the major reform, is all major companies in the electricity sector, 2 transmission companies, 5 generation, and 3 supporting companies. They are all state-owned. The ownership did not change, but structure changed significantly. Right after the major reform, there was a rapid expansion of the electricity sector, driven by the demand as well as the initiative of all these new companies. The CEOs, some of them are audacious entrepreneurs and pushing for the bigger pie in this expanding industry. So China's electricity industry expanded rapidly after 2003, 2004. I said it was driven by demand because the universal access to electricity at the time remained an issue. You connect the villages, you connect the remote regions. That job was given to the 2 major transmission companies. At the same time, 5 generation companies expanded the generation capacities. The third important thing of the development in the first decade of 2000 was technological upgrading. So there was a conversion of two major policies. One is technology innovation, one is the energy expansion. So there was a conversion. If we look at a lot of technologies, a lot of global markets in the energy sector, in the electricity sector, you have to go back to the first decade of the Chinese policies in terms of a converging of the technology innovation and the energy expansion. A lot of people look at the data. I don't want to get the data now, but all of you, China has the largest, the solar has the largest the wind, but also it's the largest the solar and the wind exporter in the world. So it was able to export at a competitive price, all supported with technology upgrading in the first decade of the 21st century. This being said, China started at an extreme low point. So the achievement was so easy to be acknowledged at the time. So there was a lot of opportunities. There were a lot of low-hanging fruit for the enterprises, state as well as private, to grab the opportunities to get the benefit of it. China was talking about creating electricity market in 1998. They tried it immediately, they stopped because it didn't work. After 2003, policies introduced as a market reform tool. But electricity markets were never established, as you see in Europe. Why? There are varieties of reasons. The main reason is price was set according to a catalog system. That was very much policy decided. It's at a planner's hand. We call the NDRC, the National Development and Reform Commission. Price played a significant role under the planning system. But under the planning system, government had other instruments to make the plan work. When all other instruments were given to the market, pricing became the only instrument the government could still use to give incentives or to guide the sector. And electricity was considered as the key sector because it provides the input for all sectors in the economy. The government did not really want the price to run wild. So the pricing was in the hands of government agency. That's a part of the reason you could not have a market. At the same time, you control the price. And the investment, therefore, did not follow the price signal. So that's a part of the reason the market was never created.